In the barrel this week, we're talking about Marvel's The Defenders, the good, the great, the not so good, the Danny Rand, on this week's Fandom Roulette. Alright, welcome to the podcast. My name is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
So, Cody, what's some nerdy stuff that you've been up to lately?
This week, I guess it's about as nerdy as you can get without actually being nerdy. I was watching people play Destiny because I'm just so desperate to get the PC version of this game.
Oh, that's right. You talked about that it's not quite available for you guys yet.
Nope.
That sucks.
Yeah, it's about as nerdy as you can get. Like, you could just play the game, or you can sit there and watch somebody else play it.
That's fair. I guess for me, I am getting ready to start a new comic book called Letter 44 by Charles Soule. A brief overview of how I understand to be the premise is basically, you know how the president writes the new president a letter with advice on it? So the 44th president of the United States is elected, who ran on a platform of hope and change and changing everything up, and he gets there and the letter from 43 is like, hey, great campaign you ran there. Sorry, you can't do any of those things you say because you're too busy having to defend Earth from an alien invasion. So, yeah, it's topical, and I love Charles Soule. He is a very good comics writer. He wrote a couple of amazing runs on She-Hulk and Daredevil.
Nice.
Because he's a lawyer by trade.
Cool.
And he is getting ready to write some new cool stuff. He's getting ready to play around in the Star Wars universe a little bit and change some stuff up there as well.
Yes.
And he wrote some of the new Inhuman stuff, which was very, very good. And I'm like one of 3 people who like actually knows and likes the Inhumans, and it was very cool to see him expand that world.
Nice.
So he's responsible for the New Humans, which have been kind of making their way through television with that new Inhumans TV show, which I've not actually watched any of yet. I've heard it's a mixed bag, but I'm really excited about it because I love the Inhumans.
Why do I feel like this is the first time I'm hearing about this?
About the Inhumans?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I had no idea there was a TV show.
Oh, yeah.
No, not the concept. I know the concept of the Inhumans,
okay, yeah.
But I didn't realize there was a TV show for it.
Yeah, so it was originally going to be a movie, and it was going to be right before Infinity Wars, and then at the last minute they decided they were going to drop it and turn it into a TV show. And so I've heard...
Is it a Netflix show?
No, it's an ABC show.
Interesting.
So now there's like a little bit of controversy surrounding it because they aired the pilot in theaters in IMAX, which I guess is only kind of accenting just how much of a TV show it is.
Huh.
So it's kind of an interesting little, I feel, maybe like not necessarily a stumble from Marvel's part or on Marvel's part, but not the best idea they've ever had, because I guess everything kind of looks rather TV-ish.
Ooh, okay.
I think, from what I've seen, I think one of the biggest offenders is Medusa's costume in general. It looks like she kind of just fell into a velour pile and kind of just stumbled out, and she was like, I'm here in velour. But the
is that her backstory?
No, her backstory is she can control her hair telepathically, I want to say. And she's also married to Black Bolt, who can't... No, she's not telepathic. This is important. Because she's able to understand and dictate what Black Bolt wants to do just by making meaningful eye contact with him.
Aww,
it's very beautiful.
It sounds so sweet and weird
at
the same time.
Oh my god, I love the Inhumans so much. They're so sweet and weird. I actually ran across them in reading Guardians of the Galaxy, and I fell in love with them. They're so weird and about the most Jack Kirby thing I've ever read. So they're a lot of fun. But yeah, so Charles Soule did some good work over there, and I'm excited to try out this new comic. Maybe we'll talk about it at some point. So
nice.
Who knows? But yeah, so this week we're going to be talking about something that Cody and I have watched recently, and a relatively recent addition to the Marvel canon, which is Marvel's The Defenders, which is streaming right now on Netflix. So this was kind of the culmination of a journey that was kickstarted by Daredevil back in 2015, I want to say. Does that sound right?
That sounds about right. I can't remember, though.
I was still in grad school at the time, so I think it was 2015.
Yeah, and just so everyone's aware, This is probably going to be a very spoilerific episode.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have not seen The Defenders, I would hit the pause button.
Yeah.
And then go watch all of it, because you can binge it in a couple of nights. I promise that's what I did.
Yeah, I think, it took me like 2 days to binge it.
And then hit the play button.
Yeah.
Right, like, now.
Yeah, so, spoilers ahoy. And if you haven't seen any of the other ones...
You might want to go watch those, too.
Yeah, I full disclosure, have not watched Iron Fist because I was told that it wasn't very good. I quite enjoyed the other 4 seasons of shows out there. I think that all of them are very good in some ways and kind of mixed bags in other ways, but overall I've really quite enjoyed all of them. I think they've all done really cool and interesting things, but this series is kind of the culmination of this journey that was kicked off by Daredevil. And actually, fun fact for you, if you have ever read the Brian Michael Bendis run of Daredevil...
Nope.
So he was writing Daredevil in like the early 2000s, right before Civil War happened.
Okay.
And that was the first time that you saw Jessica Jones, because Jessica Jones was a creation completely created by Brian Michael Bendis, who's actually a Cleveland native, fun fact. And Jessica Jones was Matt Murdock's bodyguard, and she was seen hanging out with Luke Cage and Iron Fist in a couple of issues here or there as well. So all 4 of these characters interacting have happened quite a lot in the comics, and Jessica Jones's first appearance was actually hanging out with Matt Murdock.
Nice.
So there you go. And if you ever read her comic, which is called Alias, Brian Michael Bendis does such a good job of introducing her that you thought she would have been a character in Marvel for years. Like, he seamlessly integrates her into the Marvel universe, in my opinion. But yeah, so... do you want to give a brief overview about what The Defenders is about?
If I had to give you the TLDR version, the too long, I didn't read this version of it, these 4 people...
I guess TLDW.
If you
want to think about it like that.
Or TLDL, too long, didn't listen.
That's fair.
Anyways, off tangent a little bit.
What?
It's the story of these 4 superheroes that have had at least one season of their own to kind of develop them a little bit. And they all seemingly get involved with the Hand, which is this criminal... I know, it's this criminal organization that dates back to, like, feudal Japan, if I'm not mistaken.
Probably earlier. I think in the comics it's probably, like, one of the earliest things. Yeah,
right.
Probably.
And I know Daredevil deals with it in his season.
Yeah.
Iron Fist definitely does a huge part with the Hand. But all of them seemingly... unite under one fighting force to deal with the Hand after they all, kind of stumble into it. Some are kind of looking for the Hand, others accidentally stumble into it, but it's this, I don't know, I guess it would be the equivalent of the Avengers for the Netflix universe.
Sure, yeah. I think that makes sense too, just because, well, a little bit of backstory on the Defenders, if you will indulge me. Yeah. The Defenders were kind of designed as there's 2 aspects of them. They're almost always a secret team, and at least in the comics, they always have super weird combinations. It's like, Doctor Strange, Swamp Thing, Beast, and, like, Ghost Rider all team up, and they're, like, a Defender.
Damn, see, that sounds dope.
See, I know, right? And that's probably never actually been a Defenders team, and someone will call me out on that. But it's always kind of like a weird arrangement of people, but in this case it works really well, probably because they're saving Heroes for Hire for that eventual show where they just combine Luke Cage and Iron Fist into one big show with Misty and Colleen, and it'll be called Heroes for Hire because that's always sort of the name of their ongoing series. So yeah, so the Defenders, as you said, they're kind of like the Netflix Avengers, which I guess not necessarily to cast aspersions on them, but it's 4 characters who are all kind of trying to do their own thing, uniting against a common enemy, about as clunkily as the original Avengers team-up occurred.
Oh, absolutely.
Which I think was pretty great. But yeah, so let's see. One of the things I'd really like to start talking about is the color of the show.
Yes, you were mentioning this, and I didn't see it right away.
Yeah,
it wasn't actually until the scene that you were telling, or the scene that you showed me on your laptop before recording, of when all of the Defenders get together
for the first time, which this is something we're going to be talking about in a little bit, I'm sure, is episode 4.
Yeah, it's a pretty far way in.
It's a slow burn. One might argue almost too slow of a burn, but that's something we could talk about in a little bit. But one of the coolest things, in my opinion, and this was something that I talked pretty extensively with my friend Jake about before he showed me the show, and and so I'm going to give him credit on this one because he was the one who brought it up, and it was just something I probably would have noticed it if I watched it on my own. But each one of these characters has a color scheme for their shows.
Yep.
So everything in Daredevil is bright reds, very harsh neon tones. That hallway fight in season 1, lots of red light in there. Jessica Jones, everything about her is blue. So in that first season when she's in the hotel room and someone pulls the fire alarm, all the lights go out and it has a very blue tone to it. Everything about her show is blue. Luke Cage is lots of yellows, and I would say kind of warm yellows as well. And then everything Iron Fist is basically green. And so one of the things that they would do to kind of almost help you into the different scenes is they would have transitions where they would go from one color palette to another color palette, and then that individual character on the screen would almost be lit with the backdrop in color and things like that. So, for instance, there's a scene with Matt, and he's in the confessional booth at the church, and it's all kinds of red velvet, because if you've ever been to a Catholic confessional booth, they tend to have red velvet and things like that. And then transition, you see a red subway car, you see a blue subway car, and then it's Jessica Jones investigating something, and everything she's in the library with blue file cabinets, which I don't actually think happened in the same episode, but that's just an example of that's a potential transition that they could have had.
Yeah.
And then the very first shot of season 4, which is the first time these characters kind of talk to each other.
Episode 4.
Or episode 4, yeah, not season 4. Episode 4, the first time all of these characters talk and interact with each other, the very first shot is this shot of the sign of the Chinese restaurant that they kind of use as their whole hangout and their holding place. And it has all 4 colors incorporated throughout the sign. So it has, red claws, the dragon's green, it has yellow fangs and other elements of yellow, and then the blue stripe going down the side. And so this is the first time they're all together, and you have this beautiful shot of this sign that's incorporating all 4 of the colors, as in this is the first time we're all kind of seeing them interact. And so that right there was brilliant for a couple of reasons. The first reason is it allows your mind to kind of see whose show you're watching at the moment, or whose scene you're watching at the moment, and then the kind of tone of the show, because they've all had similar but in many ways different tones. Then the other thing is that is so incredibly comic book-y that
totally.
I could have spit. It was so great. And I think one of the things that I've kind of been seeing with Marvel in general is they seem to be trying to make a pretty big push towards things at least aesthetically looking a little bit more like a comic book. If I was reading a Defenders book, I could definitely see the artist doing things like that, where, if it's a Jessica Jones scene, they would have maybe a blue background, or if the 4 of them were arguing and they were just doing character silhouettes, it would be Matt on a red silhouette, Jessica on a blue silhouette, Luke on a yellow, and then Danny on a green. And it just felt so comic booky to me. I loved it. So,
it was
thoughts?
Great. I loved it. I almost feel because I noticed it right away in episode 4, where I think the first I guess maybe the second big fight scene happens, where you're actually inside the shop, and the shop is also done in all those colors.
Yeah.
There's I think there's red pillars, and some of the walls in the back were blue.
Yep.
And there was this kind of weird or yellow light.
Yep.
The lights were all kind of yellowy.
Yep.
And I know there was green in there somewhere, but I can't remember if that was the tablecloths or whatever.
I think the lighting was kind of greenish, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, but all the colors were in that scene, and that's the first time I was Oh! I saw that, and then I actually went back to a couple of scenes. Not like I haven't rewatched it again, but I would like to.
Yeah, for sure.
To go back and watch some of those scenes, because when you were mentioning like the red subway car and then it pans to like a blue subway car, I don't think I noticed that the first time I saw it. Mm-hmm. But subconsciously, I always knew what scene and who I was like going to be following. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't at the time until episode. God, I'm doing it now too.
Yeah, sorry.
Episode 4.
That's my bad.
Once I got to episode 4, I finally realized, oh, there were color schemes that were guiding me the whole time, and I didn't notice it till episode 4. So that was really cool. I loved it. I agree with you. It definitely had a great comic book feel. The only thing I thought was, because I was trying to like think back to the original stuff, so Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist. I don't remember them playing a lot with Iron Fist colors like that. And if when I remember seeing the intro for the show for the first time, I was kind of like, really, green? Like, I was like, I thought that was a little weird.
Well, if you ever look at his like original costume with his amazing deep V unitard with the yellow frame, so you can see that Iron Fist tattoo right there on his chest.
Yeah.
Green was always a big color scheme for him, but he hasn't gotten his costume yet. And
right.
Most of the greens he wore were kind of like muted olives versus like, I mean, like, my God, Luke Cage like found a deal on like 2X yellow, like highlighter yellow DVs and was like, oh, excuse me, how much are these? And they're like, oh, we're actually running a sale. And he was like, yes, and he bought all of them. Probably because I assume shopping as Luke Cage is very complicated.
I'm sure,
because that dude is big and also muscular. You gotta get the right cut so you can show off all of your sweet Luke Cage muscles. And then Matt wore a lot of red, and I think one of the things about Matt is red is almost always present because his glasses.
Yeah, his glasses are
red. And then Jessica.
I do remember some of the scenes with Jessica Jones. There, like, she always was kind of given a blue. Like, there was always a little bit of it, not a whole lot. Like, it was pretty subtle. Like, I know I didn't notice it for a bit until I think I got to like the first. I guess it was a dream sequence in Jessica Jones. So, spoiler alert for Jessica Jones. There's a scene where she's with the main villain, and she's trying to throw herself over this building to try to basically kill herself or break this. I think she was. Yeah, so flashback, dream sequence, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. She was going back to that moment, and I remember her being very blue. Yeah, and I think that might have been when I first noticed that they did a color scheme for her too.
Yeah, when she wore her costume in it, there were lots of blues in her costume in the comics and also in the show because Jessica Jones tries being like a superhero for 5 minutes, and then
that didn't pan out.
No, well, so it's like her first night on the gig, she gets thralled by the Purple Man.
Oh shit!
And so that's basically why to this day she is not a superhero. She will never be a superhero. She has super strength, and in the comics at least, she's married to Luke Cage. They have a kid together. She'll fight. But, she is very adamant that she is not a superhero.
That's fair. That's a pretty scarring first incident.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that's, the real interesting thing that Bendis was playing with Jessica Jones and her story is, first off, it's, about a very broken character, and it's about a character who is trying to sort of live up to this ideal, but, she gets a run-in with, the worst kind of scum man, and who exploits this goodness about her, and it's this deep scarring that she's still kind of dealing with a lot in her comics. For the record, Alias is a very good comic. I would highly recommend it to anyone who is looking for a good comic. Purple Man doesn't show up until a little later in it, but it's overall very good because you just kind of see how her character develops and her kind of watch her worldview evolve. So another thing I'd like to talk about, and this is something that I don't know if I would put it in the bad column, but I would definitely put it in the not so great column, is the pacing of the show.
Yeah, pacing is definitely... It took them a bit to all get together. Yeah. 4 episodes is kind of long for...
And I'm not one of those guys who needs, oh, God, give my action every episode needs to have one big fight sequence. in it, or else I'm gonna get real mad. I'm gonna stop watching. But I think that you could have done things to kind of like expedite their meeting one another a little bit.
Well, I mean, I watched Westworld, and I thought Westworld's pacing was a little slower than I typically like, but I loved that. So,
Sure.
Honestly, I think there were some things that they didn't, especially if you're, because at least typically, I mean, I don't know, I could be wrong, I could be very wrong, but when you're going to watch The Defenders, you're like, oh, there's a bunch of other Netflix originals with these characters in them, I'm going to watch those. So there's a lot of things that they kind of bring up in The Defenders to kind of remind you that the Hand is still this like dark organization that's trying to,
and to be fair,
take over the world.
Those early episodes did a lot of good character work for like secondary characters that you might not have seen for
that's true.
a little while. And when you hit about the halfway point, like all of those characters do kind of start taking something of a backseat, which is kind of a shame because all of the secondary characters in all of those shows have been like very fun to watch and very enjoyable. So it was nice for all of them to have their own little moments. But I just feel that like even if you started off like the first episode with like in media res, like the four of them, like all together doing some punching, and then Jessica makes some quip where it's like, how the hell did we get here? Smash cut 2 weeks earlier or whatever, and then you have those slower episodes of bringing them all together. Because in the first episode, it's very much like, here is Matt's motivation, here is Luke's motivation, here is Jessica's motivation, here is Iron Fist's motivation, here's Danny's motivation. And then in episode 2, it's like, okay, Luke and Danny have met each other, Jessica and Matt have met each other, no one really likes each other.
Right.
And then in episode 3, it's going back to everyone doing their own individual things, except at the end you have that fucking awesome fight sequence, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yes.
But I just feel like there could have been some tricks. And don't get me wrong, the episodes are really good. Everyone is doing a really good job. Sigourney Weaver crushed it, in my opinion.
When I made this joke to my friends when I first, because we watched it as a group of big nerds.
Sure, yeah.
And I thought it was funny. Like, it would have just been nice to see this show of older Sigourney Weaver just having a ball with, like, the back end of her life, just having, like, fun encounters and stuff. Because that's what it felt like. She's just, like, this, powerful, rich woman who's going around living the twilight years of her life doing like cool shit. Mm-hmm. And it was just so fun to see that. I don't know. That's all I got to say about it. But I think that was just such a fun little bit where like they would pan over to her, and I think you're supposed to realize either really early on or maybe in one of the commercials like before the show that she was supposed to be a villain.
Yeah. I think that they established it pretty well. In episode
I already knew who she was, but
with the older lady.
Right? Oh, Gao.
Yeah. And so, I think that she did a really good job. For the record, she's apparently a completely original character.
Oh, nice.
Show. And so, it was just really nice watching her interaction. It's just that I don't know. I feel like they could have sped up the process a little bit. I don't necessarily know how, but it took them 3 basically full episodes before all 4 of them were on screen together. That is a lot of time. If we're thinking about that in terms of like a movie, it's like a full hour before your team is seen on screen.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about shows though, is I think they can do stuff like this. Mm-hmm. But if you watched all of the stuff beforehand, a lot of the first 3 episodes were kind of retellings of stuff you already knew. Mm-hmm. So, because they went over the Hand. And they're this dark organization. I understand that some people might be going into the Defenders being like, oh, I only watched Jessica Jones.
Yeah.
But I had no interest in watching the other stuff. So, you might need that. But for big fans, I felt like the first 3 episodes were a little lacking in anything new. Mm-hmm. Which is probably why it felt so sluggish for us. Because we had watched all that stuff. And we're just kind of like, alright, Danny Rand's trying to fight the Hand. Move on. kind of a thing.
You know, it's almost like that whole problem with, like, anytime you picked up, like, the new Harry Potter book, like, within the first chapter, they reestablished what a muggle was. And you'd always be like, we get it, like, we know what a muggle is, we've read all the other books, and then someone would always be like, well, what if this was the first book that someone picked up? And it's like, well, why would they pick up book 4? Like, 4 is very clearly on there. It's like the 4th saga or whatever. So you do have to do some reestablishing and groundwork on the off chance that it is a person's first interaction. Because it's not fair to a person
to
say,
just assume.
You have to watch, you know, at this point, like, 3 days, full days worth of content before you can enjoy this one season. That's just not fair to the individual and the audience. So they did a good job. I just feel it would have been, it could have been done where it was like by the end of episode 1, they all kind of bump into each other and they just butt heads and they fight off a few guys, and then it's like, just leave me the hell alone. And then, you know, the next episode, someone bumps into someone else again, and it's like, I don't want to see you. And so you could have done it in a way where it's like they meet in episode 1 and just don't like each other, and then episode 3, like, the immovable hand of fate is saying, like, no, the 4 of you need to team up.
Yeah.
That could have been a really easy fix for that, I think.
Yeah, because I do feel like while the beginning was slow, that whole dynamic of them not liking each other to being like, all right, we need to work together was really quick.
Yeah.
Like, it was almost like over one episode, they're like, all right, I guess we're all buddies now. Yeah. And it's just kind of like, that felt weird. They could have spent that earlier time, like you said, developing this weird, like, you guys are weird. And then, like, being like, you're weird, but you're all right, kind of a thing.
And I also feel like they never maybe truly got to that point by the end of season 1. Like, Jess and Luke had a relationship, and by the end of the season, it's still kind of awkward. Yeah. But you can definitely tell that there's something, maybe brewing there again. And I think in the last episode, they're, like, really the only two that have any meaningful, or the last, section of that last episode. Right. They're the only two that have any, like, meaningful conversation, because Matt is, dead. Spoilers. Although if you're in this far and you heard me say spoilers, I'm sorry, but we just spoiled a lot of shit. Right. And so, yeah, I don't know if they necessarily were like, well, we're buddies. Right away, I think that they were still kind of uncomfortable being a unit by the end of the show. Yeah. So,
I don't know how I feel about that exactly. I mean, the big spoiler, at the end, Matt Murdock sacrifices himself in what kind of felt like a over-the-top way to save Danny, Luke, and Jessica from the collapse of this building, because this building's gonna blow up if they don't leave. And and one of the main villains of the season, which was Elektra, spoiler alert, if you're this, right? Oh, no. She's back, if you're following. She got revived by the Hand and kind of became their warrior, but she's kind of like teetering on the edge of whether or not she's with the Hand or not. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end, she kind of takes it by force, which is a kind of an interesting dynamic for Elektra.
For sure.
But yeah, once Matt kind of, sacrifices himself, there's really no defenders left, because he was like, they make a point to say that he was like the leader, like he was the one who had to keep them together and kind of make a tactical unit out of it, because...
Which is weird, because he never wanted to be the leader.
Oh yeah, he totally had that I never asked for this mentality. And then because, unfortunately, Danny Rand's character throughout the entirety of the Defenders was just awful to be with, like he was a child through most of it, that why would Luke and Jessica want to be with him? They basically had to, at one point, beat the crap out of him because he was throwing a temper tantrum.
That's fair. Although, I mean, there was some stupid Danny stuff that I thought was really fun. Like, when at the end of episode 3... Damn it. At the end of episode 3, when he goes into Midland Tower or whatever, that Midland Financial, and he's like, hey, guys, I know that you're the Hand, and I'm the Iron Fist, and I'm gonna fight you. And then, like, Sigourney Weaver sits down, she's like, that's really interesting, except you're not at a board meeting. It's a room full of ninjas! And
and everyone's just like...
First off, Danny, that was the dumbest possible plan you could ever have.
I'm gonna walk into the main base and tell them my plan.
I also loved it, because I thought it was so good and so dumb, and it paid off so nicely, and then, Luke Cage just punches the doors off of the hinges, which is something we'll talk about later, I'm sure, as well. Then it led to that really great fight sequence, and then you have Matt, like, running up the stairs like a dumbass, and then by the time he gets to the level, Jessica's already there because she rode the elevator like a civilized human being. And, like, all of that was so great. And you have that amazing shot of, like, Luke with the bullet holes in his chest and Danny with the fist glowing. And then Matt walks by and he's wearing the scarf as a stupid
like
blindfold.
Right.
And Jessica says he looks like a dumbass. And it's like, at that moment I was like, this is the show I always wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And from that point it was kind of like that, I suppose.
I would say from that point on it was pretty good about being a Defenders show and not just trying to cram 4 superhero characters into this weird...
Yeah, it's just part of me wishes that they quipped a little bit more.
Totally.
Because it's like Jessica just kept trying to run away, but then she would just be like, well, I have to go back now. And then she throws like a car through a wall, which was also really great. And it seemed like a lot of moments of like, I have to leave, and then they would get home and they'd be like, I can't leave anymore, they need me, and then they would go back. And then they'd be like, well, I have to leave now because, like, I'm looking out for number 1, which is me, because I don't want a bad thing to happen. Then they leave, then they get home, they're like, well, I guess that's shitty of me that I left. And then they would go back. And it was just kind of this cycle, and if it was like they spent a lot of time together and it just kept quip. And I don't even necessarily need my show to be like 100% quips all the time. That feels very Whedon-y. But it's like, Jessica's element there is she's supposed to be, strong and just sarcastic and not super quippy, but she has some quips. Her quip game is strong.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. And so, like, I think that, like, sometimes Danny's dumbassness led to some fun moments. Like the fight scene in episode 3, the amazing scene of 3 superheroes riding a subway to Hell's Kitchen, which was the absolute best thing ever. Dumb little moments like that. I think it's moments like that in general endear me to shows. I feel like I've reached this element where it's like I'm kind of post-gritty. I kind of want my shows to... You can have gritty elements. It doesn't have to be light, but it's like you need to have some stuff to cut through the grit,
Yeah.
And so every now and then there'd be little glimmers of that in the Defenders. Luke had some good moments where he would just kind of roll his eyes and just kind of be upset at the fact that he has to deal with like magic bullshit and a blind lawyer who can like use echolocation.
I love Luke Cage. I love that he's for the man that's bulletproof is kind of the down to earth, like, hold on, you're telling me there's fucking dragons and ninjas and shit?
Oh yeah, well, and
I love that.
That was and I think one of the reasons for that is everyone. I know we disagree with this. I think everyone was fine in their roles, but I haven't watched Iron Fist. But there's just something so immediately charming about Mike Coulthard, the actor who plays Luke Cage.
Okay.
That dude is so charming and he's so charismatic and...
Oh, I love it.
Like, I think a fan cast that I saw out there a lot was a lot of people wanted Terry Crews to be Luke Cage, which I think would have been good, but I think that the actor that they got, he just brings something super special to the role because he has this sort of element of him where, like, you get the feeling that being bulletproof has gotten boring to Luke Cage, that he sells really well. Like, anytime they start shooting and you watch his hoodie and his deep V get, like, torn up by bullet fire, he always has this look of, like, hasn't anyone learned by this point? And, outside of that, he's he's super charming, and the fact that he hates all of the magic stuff is wonderful. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
I'm talking a lot, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I mean, I agree. I think that everyone, in my opinion, is different. I'm not a fan of the Iron Fist.
Sure.
And we'll get into that shortly.
Sure.
But I feel like everyone else played their role. Like Jessica Jones being the reluctant hero who doesn't want to be a part of this but knows that bad shit's going to happen if she doesn't help. Like, she was perfect, and she was sassy and sarcastic, and I loved every second of her being in the shot. I loved Matt Murdock. I loved that he still treats being a hero like an addiction.
Yeah.
And that he's like at the beginning he's trying to get out of the life, so to speak. But the hand always has a knack of bringing him back in.
Yeah.
Which, and again, I loved that he was also a little bit reluctant, but he was just kind of that natural born leader in that sense, that he was just able to lead the team when it counted. And I loved that Luke Cage was kind of the anchor, like the down to earth, like, we need to put all this into perspective. We're not going to go around and because that was the thing about Danny Rand and the Iron Fist. He's almost in the Defenders. He's almost like a radical superhero, and not like the whoa cowabunga radical, but like he was willing to let people die in order to stop the hand.
Yeah,
and it was nice,
didn't he?
Yeah, because like him and his significant other, Colleen, I couldn't remember her name, were just so like we need to blow this place up with C4, and it's like, whoa, you're gonna topple a building in the middle of a busy area of
middle of Midtown, Manhattan, Hell's Kitchen. So
it was nice that Luke Cage was the guy who was like, all right, I understand that we need to defeat the Hand, but we are not going to be killing people. Like, we're not monsters. We're not the Hand. So I feel like everyone played their roles right, in my opinion. And I guess we could move on to this topic.
Sure.
The not so great. I wasn't a fan of the Iron Fist. And the only thing that brings this show from being amazing to being just kind of amazing is the focal point of the Defenders being focused around Danny Rand.
Sure.
Because of his Iron Fist power. And a lot of that stems from season 1 of the Iron Fist.
Yeah.
And how it wasn't good. In my opinion, there's a lot of things that kind of come off weird, kind of come off really old, kind of like old bad practices that we do in cinema, and you never really understand what the Iron Fist is. Now, I'm sure in the comics they kind of go into, like, who is Danny Rand and who is the Iron Fist, but coming out of season 1 of the cinematic universe, because I didn't read the Iron Fist comics, I actually didn't know it was a thing until the Netflix, preview.
Yeah.
So I was going in it blind, and I was kind of happy about that. I wanted to get a fresh take on Danny Rand.
Sure.
At the end of season 1, I still wasn't sure what his character was.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like he was a prepubescent teen who couldn't figure out if he was this immortal living weapon trained by monks in some, out of plane existence, or if he was the heir to a multi-billion-dollar company. Like, what was he trying to do? And the mistakes he makes in Iron Fist 1, or season 1 of Iron Fist, are the same mistakes he makes in the Defenders.
Okay.
And to me, that annoys the crap out of me when a hero doesn't, like, especially if it's fresh, because I think canonically how it works is once Iron Fist that season ends, Defenders picks up right after that.
Okay.
So it's not a whole lot of time, maybe a little bit for him to travel, because he goes back.
Well, they start off in Cambodia or whatever.
Right. So they go to wherever the entrance to Kunlun, the interdimensional heaven planescape that he goes to. They go there at the end of season 1 and find out it's fucked. Like, everything's been destroyed because he left.
Yeah.
And so the Defenders picks up literally right after that. Where they're, leaving the entrance to Kunlun, and they're going back to New York to be like, we gotta fight the Hand, mano a mano, we gotta destroy it, all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And within that time frame, he doesn't learn to control his emotions and think rationally.
Okay.
Which was his big fault in the first one, and he's like, oh man, that really fucked me up. I should reconsider that. Mm-hmm. And he does the same exact thing again in the Defenders, which ultimately ends up getting somebody killed.
Sure. Who knows? Maybe that'll be like the push to make him into a more sensible character.
I mean, I hope so.
Because now he has a team behind him. So full disclosure, I've not watched the Iron Fist TV show at the time of the recording. I'm thinking that I might try it out for a couple of reasons. One, just to see how bad it is. And then two, I heard that one of my favorite actors is kind of the bright spot in what is otherwise a bad show, which is the actor who played Faramir in the Lord of the Rings movies, who apparently is just crazy as hell. He's like the villain.
Yes. Oh my god, he's the best part of Iron Fist. Yeah. I actually would have rather watched
a show about
his character.
Is he Steel Serpent in the show?
They never mention who he is.
Does he have a cool tattoo on his chest?
No.
Okay.
He works for, again, spoilers for the Iron Fist.
For Rand Enterprises.
Yeah, he's the guy who co-owns Rand Enterprises with Danny Rand's father, who dies in a plane crash.
Yeah.
Which is
organized by...
Which you find out in Iron Fist, that it's organized by the Hand and this guy.
Sure.
Who I've now can't remember his name.
It's fine.
Being on the spot.
That's cool.
So, and his character's sweet because he finds out very quickly that he can't die. Mm-hmm. And every time he comes back, he's a little crazier.
Yeah.
Like he does some pretty crazy stuff. I know you're gonna watch it, so I'm not gonna.
Yeah, that's fine.
I won't spoil the specifics, but he does some really crazy stuff and ends up being the main villain of sorts at the end, which was a great change of pace, and that's kind of one of the saving graces for that show.
Sure.
It wasn't the worst show I've ever seen because of him and because of the supporting characters who kind of made the show better than the main character, which I feel bad because and the actor's name is leaving my head.
Finn Jones.
And I don't know what else he's been in.
He was... Have you watched any Game of Thrones?
And I'm going to get probably a ton of flack for this. Sure. I have only watched the first season of Game of Thrones.
Remember the Knight of Flowers who gives Sansa the rose after his joust, and then he is gay with Renly?
Yeah.
That's the same actor.
Okay, so he's been in stuff before.
Yeah, I think that was at least one of his earliest, most prominent roles was as Loras Tyrell. I don't know if I've seen him outside of that. He's a good actor. I feel like they might have thrown... Well, so one of the things I heard, and maybe this is an excuse from him, or maybe this is an excuse from the studio in general, which is they just did not give him enough time to learn the stunt choreography and things like that. I think he had 2 days before shooting began, which just isn't a lot of time for training. But at the same time, you could also give him the fucking Iron Fist costume and then pull a stunt double in there like they did with Daredevil.
Right.
So
and so the fight scenes were pretty cool.
Okay.
It wasn't bad. There just were so few of them. I think in total there are there's 2 or 3. No, I think there's 2 really cool fight scenes, and then there's just a couple of scenes here and there with just the smidgest bit of combat. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't even call them full on fight scenes because I think one of them is he gets into a truck. Okay. And there's a guy in the truck, and they're kind of getting jerked around because the truck is moving, and so they sort of have a fight.
Yeah.
But it ends up being a lot of them going, whoa, whoa, and then accidentally hitting each other, kind of a thing.
It just seems to me, based on what you were telling me and what I've heard about Season 1, and then what I saw through the Defenders, is that they were hesitant to do an Iron Fist show because they were trying too hard to do a Netflix Marvel show.
Yeah, I mean, probably. We're getting a little off tangent here, but one of my big gripes with the Iron Fist is it never really decides what kind of show it wants to be through the whole thing. The first I think the first, 4 or 5 episodes is I would almost call it like a premiere, prime time drama of a man who thought he was, or the world thought he was gone, and he spends the majority of his time trying to fight this big conglomerate to have his name back. Because they do a lot of cool stuff, they try to, it becomes, a legal thing, and they, try to put him in, an insane asylum.
Okay.
And do all this kind of crazy stuff to get him, to make it so that he's not Danny Rand. Because otherwise he owns 51% of this big conglomerate company.
Sure.
Up until that point has just kind of been whatever. So, there were some really good parts in the beginning, but then they tried to throw Iron Fist in there, and then it was kind of weird because it was this weird, Danny Rand trying to get used to New York after being in a Shaolin monk temple for the beginning of his life. And so he was just kind of spouting off all these, kind of weird they probably meant something in the time that he said it, but, a lot of quotes from, other monks and, Gandhi and stuff like that. And it's kind of that's about all you get from his training is a bunch of quotes, and I came from Kunlun. I am the immortal Iron Fist. I train with Kunlun. Kunlun. I don't know how many times I heard Kunlun, but I don't want to hear him say it anymore.
Sure, fair enough. It's just that it's in the comics, Iron Fist is kind of the one who enjoys being a superhero the most.
Right, and I would have loved to watch, because that doesn't play up.
See, that's the thing, right?
Iron Fist.
And I feel like they might have started alluding to it in the Defender show. Maybe not to the extent where they could have done it, but he always seemed to be kind of gleeful when he was around the other heroes. It's oh man, I can stand behind this guy who gets shot with bullets, and then I can turn my fist on and punch a dude.
Right. And see, that would have been cool. I would have loved to watch that.
Yeah, maybe, who knows, maybe it'll change.
I hope so.
I hope so too, although I know given that they want to have their tone be kind of raw and gritty, it might not work like that.
But see, I have a little bit of variety in my stuff. I don't want everything that I watch to be gritty or a certain style of thing. Exactly. I love, because another show that I watch that does a really good job at kind of being, having tones in each episode that change so that you're not, stuck with grit forever is Doctor Who. Every episode is a different feel. Sometimes it's fun and campy, sometimes it's gritty and serious. Fair. Granted, it's a very different show, but I would actually really love for one of the Marvel Netflix cinematic shows to just kind of be this punchy superhero flick.
And I think one of the things that kind of does that well is aspects of the Arrowverse, which is
I have no idea what that is.
The CW's DC shows. So at this point, it is now Arrow, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, and Supergirl. There we go. And then we might be getting one or two more. I'm not sure.
Okay.
From the sounds of it, but it's you have Arrow, which is a raw, gritty superhero show, which sounds it's very similar to Iron Fist, except that the dude just has a bow and arrow. He doesn't have a magical fist. And then you had The Flash, which was initially very fun and light and campy, but has kind of gotten darker as time's gone on, to a point where I have not actually finished season 3 of that show yet. I'm just not realizing it. And then you have Legends of Tomorrow, which is a wacky space-faring time travel show, which is kind of tonally can be a mess from time to time, but I always enjoy it because all the characters are having a lot of fun on it. And then Supergirl, which was it's a very fun show, and it has its darker moments and its darker elements. But it's 4 shows, and every now and then they'll do these amazing crossovers where it's you can always kind of tell the tone of based on what city they're in, because there's a joke where in season 1 there's a Flash Arrow crossover, and Flash is acting all grumpy because there's the villain can affect moods, and Oliver, who is Green Arrow, is isn't this supposed to be the fun city? And so it's there's inner acknowledgement. I think if you did something like that on the Netflix show, that would have been kind of great. And I feel I think the show that came closest from breaking away from that was Luke Cage, because there were aspects of Luke Cage had its dark, gritty elements, But I also feel that, like, Luke Cage... I don't know how I want to phrase this. Luke Cage seemed to...
He was the light in the darkness
of that show. Yeah,
he seems
to have the most fun with aspects. Although I guess that's not right either, because...
It depends.
That show got pretty dark near the end there, didn't it?
I mean, it was dark pretty all around, but they did a good job at kind of cutting the grit.
Yeah.
Like, giving you a little bit of that chaser so that you could be like... Okay, let's get back into the grit. And I think that came along in the fight scenes where it was just him.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to... Because, like, that was the thing, is he was so reluctant to be a hero because of the shootout and, like, granted, spoilers for Luke Cage. Sorry, everybody. Like, the shootout at the beginning where he deflects a bullet, but that bullet hits his surrogate father.
His Pops.
Yeah, Pops.
Well,
and... So I feel like it was a dark and gritty show, but like they did a really good job at cutting it when he was by himself or when he was just interacting with people, not on like the superhero like Power Man level, but like just Luke Cage. There's some good chemistry there, and I think that might have been what you meant. I'm sorry to kind of interrupt and take a handle on it.
I think another thing that might help with that too is the soundtrack of that show was so radically different from anything else, and I wish it was something that, like, I think one of the best moments of that fight scene in episode 3 of The Defenders is when Luke comes in and that hip hop like song just busts in, because it felt so cool. Like, and there was that hip hop song in the last episode as well, and I think that was probably something that made Luke Cage maybe feel a little bit tonally different, was like the action was accompanied by this just like cool fun soundtrack, which maybe changed it up a little bit as well. Alright, and then
you know what, let's we're getting close to closing time.
There's one last thing I'd like to talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is the powers that they have.
Okay.
So this isn't necessarily a gripe or anything, but
I already know what you're going for.
Let's look at, and this is not fair because it's Netflix with a Netflix budget, but let's look at the Avengers power set real quick. You got strong punch super soldier who can throw a shield. Got a bow and arrow guy who can fire like a million bows and arrows. You have Black Widow who has her like shock gauntlets and is just kind of like a super spy. You have Iron Man. You have Thor who can fly and has his magical hammer, and you have the Hulk who's like a green berserker man.
Yeah.
So you have some like varied power sets there.
Mean, a lot of them come in the form of strength in some way, though.
Yeah, but
maybe not everybody, but a lot. Like, you could tell there's a power gap in between some of them.
For the Defenders, you have a person who can punch good. You have a person who can punch good and is bulletproof. You have a person who can punch good and is a sassy alcoholic. And then you have a person who can punch good and does flips.
You know, it's true. All of them can punch pretty good.
There's some good punchers on that team.
Maybe they should have rebranded themselves and called themselves the Punchers.
The Punchers? Yeah. The Punch Fenders.
Not the Punishers, but just the Punchers. No, because
he's getting his own show.
Which I'm excited for.
It's going to be shoot guns all the time.
Yeah, it's going to be bang bang.
But yeah, and so I didn't have a problem with it. I just think it's funny that the 4 Defenders all have the punch powers. But one of the best ways, this is something I made an observation on Facebook, and people seem to enjoy it, was a very effective way of showing a person who is super strong or who can punch good is complete and total disregard for doors.
Oh yeah, doors are just a mere abstract concept to them at that point.
I think there might have been like 4 or 5 doors that remained on their hinges throughout, and walls too, because man, there were a lot of holes in walls by the end of that show. Including a police precinct, because they punched their way out of a police precinct.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's something that's very silly, and it's just kind of a light little thing to end on. But I just thought it was funny that every time they ran across a door, they basically broke it off its hinges. And then one of the few times where they kept the door on their hinges was when they went into that Chinese restaurant because they were trying to keep a low profile. So I was like, oh, cool. That's really nice to the owner of this Chinese restaurant. He doesn't have to deal with the damage of his door being, oh, there's a truck through the front windows now. And I feel really bad for the owner of that Chinese restaurant because he was just trying to live his life and trying to shut down for the night. And then he got a goddamn truck through his door. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of funny that their power set was just punch.
I also love the idea that there's a person on the Marvel cast whose sole job is to make sturdy things like really flimsy and cheap so that normal actors can actually just punch through them, like making like styrofoam doors or something, especially with Jessica Jones, because she like tore through a bunch of shit, like broke locks, like bent bars and stuff. It's like, God, my job every day is to make these bendable bars for Jessica Jones.
And I think that's the thing, too, is I think, like, Jessica Jones' probably power level is, like, in terms of just raw strength, probably one of the strongest. Because it's like, Luke Cage is very, very strong, but I think his thing is more bulletproof.
Right.
Although he did bend those metal bars around that dude, didn't he?
He also just smashed those cuffs, or he snapped those cuffs off of him when he was in prison.
Which was the best.
Yeah.
Man. And so I think that was the thing, too, is I think where that show really shined was the smaller character moments where you really saw the heart and to the core of the characters. I wish Matt was a little bit more fun in it.
He is definitely, like, the grittiest of...
Yeah, he's the most dour, he's the most gritty. And I think that's probably just because we're, like, in very deep Frank Miller Daredevil territory at the moment. And then it's going to transition into, like, Brian Michael Bendis, which is, like, still gritty, and then hopefully one day we'll achieve the height of the greatest Daredevil panel to ever exist in the history of comic books, in my humble opinion, which is when he gets out of prison, when evidence suggests that no, he is not actually Daredevil, and he goes to a Christmas party with his glasses and his walking stick, and he has one of those headbands with the little horns, wearing a bright red sweatshirt that says "I'm not Daredevil" written on it, which is it's so good. It always appears in every out of context comic panel you can find, and it's just so good. So yeah, hopefully we'll make it one day to that, Matt. Obviously he can keep that whole Catholic guilt thing going, but there's been different iterations of Matt, like every character, and every now and then he's like a fun flip lawyer. So maybe we can get there one day. That'd be nice.
I want to end on a simple, just straight question.
Yeah.
Of the Defenders, who's your favorite?
Luke Cage.
You know, I've been thinking about this because I was going to ask you this question like easily 15, 20 minutes ago.
Sure, yeah.
And I had a hard time choosing between Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, and I think I'm going to have to go with Jessica Jones.
Fair enough.
I just love that. I love that snark, and I love the fact that she just doesn't want to do this.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like in any group dynamic, I'm almost always drawn towards the heart of the team. So, like, my favorite Guardian is, like, Groot. I love Groot. I'm always drawn to the heart. Hearts tend to be the big guys. And, so here's Jessica Jones. And then I guess I would say that The Defenders is a very good, very solid show, very entertaining, and it could have been great, but as we've talked about, there were some issues here or there, but it was definitely worth a watch in my opinion. So.
Oh yeah, if you have Netflix and you haven't watched these, just skip Iron Fist and everything's great.
Yeah, fair enough. That's fair. All right,
yeah, definitely worth a watch though.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to our Defenders podcast episode.
Our grab bag, our random mystery.
Yeah. So this one just happened to be that we both watched it relatively recently, and we both had some ideas about it, and a couple of disagreements here or there along the way, which is always fun, because it's always fun to talk about things in a little bit more of a, not a disagreement way, but just fun having these little debates and things like that. So, we want to thank you, as always, for listening. Feel free to follow us on Twitter at fandomr_podcast, or email us at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com to join in on the conversation. Tell us what you think about the Netflix TV shows. Tell me how wrong I am about my opinions about Iron Fist.
And let us know what you want to maybe hear in the future.
Oh, that's fair too, yeah. If there's anything you want us to talk about, any any of the, different things we're here to talk about. We always love to hear from our fans and has sort of joined in on the conversation. So, signing off, I'm Joe.
I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Super nerdy. Hey everyone, this is Cody, your resident nerd here at Fandom Roulette Podcast. Thank you so much for getting to this point and listening for just a little longer. If you want in on this conversation, if you want to talk about the Defenders, if you want to talk about all the other shows leading up to it, do you want to talk about Danny Rand? Do you want to be on Team Cody for no Danny Rand? Follow us on Twitter, fandomr_podcast. Talk to us about it. Let us know what you think. And if you want something a little more private, something a little more personable for me, I know you do, email us at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com. If you're looking for any news related to when our YouTube's going up, when our iTunes is going up, when episodes will be up, check out our website, fandomroulette.com. That is where you're going to want to be for anything Fandom Roulette related. Again, thank you so much for making it to this point and listening to our podcast. And as always, stay nerdy.